Welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast, where we explore the connection between nutrition, performance, and health for busy, active people. I'm Claire Shorenstein, a sports dietitian and endurance athlete, and in every episode, I share evidence-based guidance, inspiring athlete stories, and practical tips on a wide variety of nutrition topics so that you can feel better, crush your endurance goals, and thrive as a human being. Today, I'm chatting with Katie Morra all about thyroid health for athletes. Katie is a registered dietitian and Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner who specializes in complex chronic illness. Her practice, Gut Honest Truth, focuses on the precise identification and treatment of root causes behind chronic inflammatory conditions, autoimmune disease, gastrointestinal dysfunction, and thyroid dysfunction. Katie also mentors and trains dietitians and health professionals through the other branch of her business, GHT Academy, which is actually how I know Katie since I took one of her courses a couple years ago. Katie is not a sports dietitian, but she was a Division I athlete in college. And more importantly, she is such a wealth of knowledge on how to support thyroid health, particularly as an active person. We break down all the basics to help you understand why the thyroid is so important, how it interacts with different body systems, the signs and symptoms of thyroid dysfunction that you should be aware of, who needs to get thyroid labs done and what they all mean, which nutrients are essential to thyroid health, and so much more. This is a complex topic and we only scratch the surface, but it's a great place to start if you've always wanted to learn more about thyroid health and why it matters. Before we dive in, I have a quick ask. I'm an independent show currently without sponsors, and I put countless hours of my time into creating this content every other week, plus my own resources into an editor and other costs to improve your listening experience. So if this show has ever helped you with your fueling or taught you something valuable, or if an athlete story has entertained or inspired you, I would be so incredibly grateful for your support. You can spend $0 and just give me a 5-star rating and review, or maybe you're sharing an episode you love on social media or with a friend. You can buy some of my merch, like my really fun fueling stickers, or you can shop using my affiliate codes on the shop page of eatforendurance.com. I have some great discounts there. Maybe you're just throwing a few bucks my way via my Patreon page, which you can find in my show notes. Whatever it is all so incredibly helpful. I really have loved doing this podcast for the past 6.5 years, but I will admit it has become increasingly challenging and expensive, and your support will literally help keep this show going. Thank you so much. All right, here's my chat with Katie Morra on thyroid health for athletes. Katie, welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast. How's everything going for you on this fine Monday morning?
Good, Claire. Thank you so much for having me on. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Kids are out of the house. I am good to go for today. Happy to have my space back. You have two little ones, right?
Havoc in my house.
Oh,
I have 2 little boys, yeah, and
oh my goodness.
They're loud. If we hear them, I'm sorry.
All good. How old are they?
My eldest is almost 4.5, and then my baby is about to be 21 months.
Ooh, oh my goodness. So you're really in the weeds right now. Chaotic, yes. Well, today we're talking all about thyroid health, and you immediately came to mind as like the perfect dietitian to talk about this because I learned so much from you about thyroid in one of your courses in GHT Academy. So, and of course, we'll link to all your great stuff at some point. But yeah, I thought we could start out with the basics. Because people hear about the thyroid, they maybe get TSH tested in their lab work, and certain things are kind of thrown around. But I'd say that most people don't really understand what the thyroid is or understand the full set of thyroid hormones and how it works. So if you could just kind of set the stage a little bit, talk about what are the kind of the key roles and the basics when it comes to thyroid hormones and why it's important, especially for active people, that'd be awesome.
Sure. So a lot of people, we'll say generally speaking, are always thinking about the thyroid if they can't lose weight, right? Or if they're extremely fatigued, or maybe if their hair is all falling out. That's like kind of it. There are so many different like signs and symptoms of thyroid dysfunction because the thyroid plays such an integral role in essentially every single function in your cells, in your body. It's really like the master like regulator of your metabolism, right? So you have to think about its control on how much energy you produce, how well your metabolism actually works, how you regulate your body temperature, how well your brain, right, functions, and the energy that we have in our brain or in our muscles and our cells. Really thinking about also your gut function. So a lot of people who have thyroid issues may have really speedy motility or really slow. We usually think about slow just with the prevalence of hypothyroidism compared to hyperthyroidism. And then we can think about even like how your heart rate is, right? So that's really relevant for athletes if they're having real fluctuations in heart rate, even outside of exercise. It's something to think about. But it controls just so many different things in our body. And I think we kind of miss that boat in conversation a lot when we're talking, even with our doctors, our PCPs, right? Generally, even your endocrinologist. So that's the general gist of how it interacts with our entire body. As you can imagine though, if one of those things gets impacted from, let's say, low functioning thyroid, or we'll say just hypothyroidism for context purposes, so many other things can get dysregulated, right? If your gut gets off, we can start to get gut infections and overgrowth, which we can talk about in a little bit, which can then lead to things like nutrient deficiencies, malabsorption, which then can lead to, right, skin issues, brain and cognitive issues, energy depletion, recovery time issues. So there's so many different things that you can then kind of get on that hamster wheel when you talk about the thyroid. And then in terms of testing, because I think we could talk more about testing, but most people know, oh, I've had maybe my TSH or my thyroid stimulating hormone checked, right? My doctor checked it. It was in with the normal limits, which in itself is another conversation of just what is a normal limit, right?
Yeah.
So interesting enough, which we've talked about in GHD Academy lectures, is that the range that is provided, which is a pretty big range for even just TSH, actually when developed included those that had hypothyroidism, those that were not optimally functioning, right? So to say you're within range, but maybe your TSH was like 4.2 4, that doesn't really mean that you're operating where you should be operating, right? We would really like to see your TSH be like between 1 and 2. So if you're listening, you maybe have heard of somebody say your optimal, your functional range for a lab marker. It's not like a made up marker. It's really that tight, like knit where we're looking, saying, okay, we would love to see you in this number to number range, right, of TSH, whatever marker you're talking about, honestly, because that's where we find that your whole body is functioning at an optimal level, a really healthy level, not just within this, maybe you could be sick next week range, if you will. So that's first and foremost, is just looking up or learning more about optimal ranges and not just what the range that your PCP gave you or LabCorp or Quest gave you. So do you want me to go through the thyroid, like my analogy?
Yeah. Well, one quick thing. I mean, I think when it comes to ferritin and vitamin D, those are often the ones that we're talking about on this podcast frequently, and some others. But, when it comes to the optimal versus quote unquote within normal limits, and just talking about how, for anyone, but especially for athletes, like, you don't want your ferritin to be 20. Like that's not in a good place. And you likely feel like garbage if it were. So yeah, I think kind of understanding that piece of things and knowing that unfortunately, not all physicians, as amazing as physicians are, not all physicians are sports informed or even knowledgeable about these things, unfortunately. So when you're just kind of brushed off and told everything's normal, but you don't feel like everything's normal, like sometimes you do have to advocate for yourself. And so this is one area where we're definitely going to be talking about this with lab work and thyroid, because often if a TSH is even ordered at all, then it's everything's normal, And so we'll talk about kind of why a full thyroid panel might be warranted for you and in what situations and what you're looking for. But yeah, let's go through. I think it might be actually helpful to understand the thyroid in the context of the body, because, again, people don't know this stuff. Like how is it interacting? Because, there are feedback loops going on, and how is it interacting with the brain and other things? But then maybe we can even go through, you give a great car analogy in GHT Academy. So, and even like understanding the different hormones. So before we even go to like getting these things tested, people can then understand, well, what the hell is a free T4 or a total T3, what are these things? So let's go through that just so people, again, can have some basics underfoot, and then we can get into the details.
Yeah. And I did want to piggyback on one thing you said. There are even functional lab companies out there that I utilize with patients, myself, and even some of the ranges that they give you for things like ferritin aren't great, right? They're actually where I would be like, I don't love that for you. Do you have a gut problem? Right? Just keeping that in mind is always kind of like doing some of your own research or working with maybe more of a functionally trained individual that can actually like look at your specifics too, right? Because if you have any symptoms and you're kind of on that low normal or even like high end, you want to use the context of your case, right? Not just lab on its own. Yeah. So that is a great point. Okay, so let's start with we'll try to make it simple of how the body does things, if you will, right? So,
thyroid for dummies. Let's do Cliff Notes.
We can skip the brain part, but essentially the brain releases something called TRH to your pituitary gland. And that's really where the things that most of us have heard about start the thyroid, right, hormone creation. So our pituitary gland releases something called TSH. And this is just important because we're going to talk about the testing and the markers that we want to do. And so TSH then goes to our thyroid and communicates with our thyroid saying, you need to produce or not produce, right, your thyroid hormones. And then we'll go into the analogy after this to kind of wrap it up. But your thyroid then produces, well, for context purposes, we'll just say two main hormones. It produces your T4 and your T3. The thyroid primarily, though, and I'm talking like 90% of the creation is actually T4. And for our conversation, T4 is this inactive thyroid hormone, which means by itself, it doesn't actually do what we need it to do to affect our energy, our metabolism, our gut function, all the things we talked about at the start, unless it gets converted into the active form, which is our T3. So our thyroid produces 90% inactive, 10% active. The 90% then has to get converted to the active form by the rest of your body. So that's your muscles, that's your liver, your kidneys, your gut. So having health of those organs matter too, right? Because without the health of them, you can't actually actively convert into the active hormone, which then can connect to essentially the thyroid hormone receptor and do its job in the body. So when we talk about these markers, it's always important to hear the words like inactive, active, because those matter when you're actually looking at testing, right? So the problem in traditional care is when we do a lot of testing, you may get a TSH and you may get a T4. And if those are normal, they'll be like, you're good, right? We don't really have to look further. Whether you feel normal, you feel okay or not is not part of that conversation, right? They're just like, these are good and we would see these be off. That's not true. We are essentially then saying that we're just assuming this person's so healthy that their liver, their gut, their kidneys, their muscles are all doing what they need to do to help their body convert to the active form. But this person coming to you probably feels like crap, right? They feel lousy. And that's not likely the case for a lot of these people that have potential thyroid issues. So the other thing I'll just throw in here before we talk about the analogy is that in the process of the creation of T4 and T3, something can happen where that T4 actually doesn't become the active hormone T3. It becomes this thing called reverse T3, which some of that's going to happen. We don't love it because I'll tell you my analogy, it's like slamming on the brakes of the car. But this is super, super common in athletes. So we'll talk about that, I think, maybe a little bit later when we talk about like what to be looking out for. But hopefully we can re-listen to that like 5 times and then get that through your head. And then we can go into the thyroid analogy. I think is really helpful because it helps people actually understand the importance without like all the fancy lingo. Are you okay with me jumping?
Yeah, right into that one? Go in.
So I have a car analogy I kind of came up with. I feel like I elaborated on everyone else's car analogies that exist. So we have your TSH, your thyroid stimulating hormone, which is the number one thing your doctor is going to check. Sometimes if you're lucky, you get a little bit more. But I think of the thyroid stimulating hormone as the gas gauge on the car, right? It's telling you, do you need to fuel up or not? So if it's on low, right, it's going to say, hey, it's going to go high, essentially. So we need more hormone. We need more hormone. We need gas in the car. And it tells your thyroid to then produce or then fill up essentially on T4 and T3 production. Now, T4 is like the engine of the car. Right? It's that inactive hormone. It's the engine. So the engine, it starts the car, right? But it doesn't make the car move. So we then need to be able to actually step on the gas pedal to make the car move, which is that conversion of T4 to your active hormone T3. So we're testing, do we have enough gas in the car? We're filling up, we're hopefully converting. But for a lot of athletes and generally for a lot of people who are either under eating, over exercising, stress, there's a laundry list of things, we can actually convert to that reverse T3, which is like slamming on the brakes of the car. And we wouldn't know if we're doing that, right? Unless we actually test it. And then we have our thyroid antibodies. There's TPO and there's TGAB. And I always think of those like the emergency flashers. It is a car on the side of the road, putting their flashers on, warning everybody and every like passing car, something is wrong. Come check on me, something's wrong. So when those are elevated for you, right, it's your immune system saying, hey, something's going on here, right? And what happens is essentially our immune system starts to attack our own thyroid tissue, and we get this destruction of thyroid tissue, which then downstream essentially impacts your ability to actually produce your hormones, which is a whole problem. And so a majority of people who actually have thyroid issues have this autoimmune thyroiditis, which, you know, Claire, when you were talking about testing and you're like, you're lucky if you get a TSH, we actually do this so backwards, right? In traditional healthcare, we do it so backwards because for most people, the very first marker that's going to be off for them is actually the antibodies. It can take like 7 to 10 years for the antibodies to essentially destruct parts of the thyroid for then you to all of a sudden see an impact on the TSH and the hormone levels. So it's like you could have somebody for 10 years feeling lousy, right? Getting their TSH, like, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, until maybe it's so far down the road that they're so destructive that they end up on medication, right?
Yeah.
So, we could do this for like 12 hours. I think.
I know that's the thing. There's so much to talk about with thyroid, and like, I really want, you know, I was telling you offline before we started, like, I really just want people to have like, you know, basic, but not like superficial, but like, you know, a decent understanding of thyroid, why it's important, but connecting it back to, you know, like, cause like most people are, I mean, many people are active, but some of the people listening are really heavily training. And so kind of understanding parts of your body and how it's influenced through feeling and all of that. So yeah, we can go so many different ways with, with thyroid. So I don't want to like overwhelm people, but at the same time, like I want them to understand why this is important. And also how it can be really confusing because even with lab work, you know, you look at different labs and like things are called different, like everything's called something different. And it's like, you know, I don't know, like they spell it out and someone's like, well, what's, you know, TPO? It's not called that. It's called something else. And then, you know, or it's like, I don't know, it says all these different things. So people get really confused.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I think this is just an area of large confusion and when medication is warranted. I mean, I get so many people who are already on Synthroid. And then, of course, Synthroid, you can't eat for a little while. So, like, that impacts our fueling plan. And so I just want people to, again, get a little bit of a better understanding.
A little bit of like, and it also helps you when you start to advocate for lab work and different things. I also, just for anyone who's listening, if you are looking at your labs, like pull them out, right? Go through what I was just saying. And then if you see something like you might see total thyroxine, which is your T4, it will often say T4 after it, hopefully. And then you'll see something maybe that says free, right? And it's really important to note not just thyroid, but any hormones, when you see total versus free, total is how much, right, you're in totality producing and have in your bloodstream. And free is how much your body is actually able to utilize. It's available for use in your body. So you could, your total T3, your active hormone could be great, right? But your free level could be really, really low. And then we have to figure out, well, why is that happening? Well. So it gets more complicated, but just so you're not like, there's multiple T3s. One is telling you the total and one is telling you the amount your body has to use.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to the testing for a little bit because I have a little more questions about that. But I just want to spend one more moment on kind of the interplay of thyroid with other parts of the body, especially when it comes to what athletes should care about everything. They're human beings, right? But like the things that really, like, you know, we think about the gut, we think about bone health. I wanted to spend a little moment on cortisol, like how that kind of weaves in and connects with stress. So, I mean, the thing with the gut, I mean, again, we could spend a million years on just the gut, like you in your lectures, you spent so long in that. So we don't need to go too much into it. But obviously, if our gut is not functioning, that's going to impact our ability to absorb, you know, thyroid important nutrients. Maybe it might help to kind of let people know, like, what nutrients are really key to thyroid health. And then we can kind of go a little bit deeper into this, but maybe like start there for a minute.
So a lot of nutrients, of course, are integral roles in thyroid conversion and thyroid health as a whole. So I'll say a couple of the big ones are like selenium and zinc that we don't think about quite a lot. Selenium is hard for people because I feel like that's one of the number one deficiencies that people either aren't eating because like some of the the foods they might not be eating, like
Brazil nuts. Yeah. That's the only one I think of.
They're so random. And unless somebody's intentionally being like, eat 2 Brazil nuts a day, like you may not be getting enough selenium. And
Brazil nuts, just as an aside, is it just me? I think Brazil nuts are disgusting. I don't know.
They're not. They're not.
It's the texture. They're weird.
Throw them in a smoothie.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, or
I think they're so gross. I keep trying to eat them. I'm like, no.
And stuff, just like throw it in there. But you have to be careful because you can get toxic levels too.
Yes,
so
yes. Don't go nuts.
Make smoothies or salads. Sometimes I'll just do like grind nuts.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
Yeah, but they're not. They're not.
Yeah, I had to throw that in there because everyone's always talking about Brazil nuts. I'm like, can we just be practical for a minute and just acknowledge that they suck?
They're not like disgusting.
No, they're not. They don't taste good. They're not like cashews or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? Yeah, they're a superior tasting nut.
And then I'm going to put a couple together. So there's like zinc and iron too, right? Zinc and iron are super, super important for thyroid health and thyroid hormone conversion. And then we get this problem of that interplay of gut and thyroid too, and nutrition, where if your gut's not functioning, right, some of the first nutrients to get consumed by like bad bacteria in the gut are going to be like your iron levels. So if you have really low iron and you don't have a normal menses and things like that, the very first thing I would think about is like your gut health. And then you have to think about like that vicious cycle of iron depletion not being good for the thyroid, and is something in the gut eating it, low stomach acid problems. So we can get there later. But zinc, iron, your B vitamins are going to be huge, which is really important for athletes because we are just burning through different nutrients like magnesium and B vitamins when you are exercising, especially if you're over exercising and kind of under eating or sleeping poorly, any of that, you are going to like mega be going through those important nutrients for thyroid hormone conversion, especially B12. And then we can think about vitamin D, which everybody is low in, not just athletes, just across the board. Vitamin E, A, and omega-3. So also, if you have an issue with healthy fat intake or absorption, like if you've had your gallbladder out or anything like that, A, D, E, K, and fish oil are all going to potentially be low. And those are all super, super important, especially for like cellular health of the thyroid. So we pretty much named every nutrient as important.
Yeah. And the other thing that came to mind real fast is like anyone who is on more of a plant-based diet. If we have, it's not uncommon for me to get vegan or vegetarian athletes, endurance athletes. And so, it can be tough because many of them do have nutrient deficiencies in some of these things. So
if you're an athlete, the number one thing I would honestly recommend for those people is doing something like an advanced nutrient test that actually looks at like extra and intracellular nutrient testing, even just once a year, that can help you replete specific to you. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that if you are already limiting yourself in certain ways dietarily, right? And then maybe exercising quite a lot, stress, like all these different things, and then add in if you also have a thyroid condition, like that can be very instrumental in your health. To do that.
Yeah, totally. Hey everyone, before we keep going, I want to share something an athlete I work with said recently. He said, "It's been such an up and down battle. I am so grateful to have you in my corner." That's exactly the kind of support I aim to provide through Eat for Endurance. Most of the athletes I work with are motivated and doing their best, but they're juggling a lot: training, work, family, life, all the things, right? What they often need isn't more nutrition rules, but someone in their corner to help them fuel in a way that's realistic and sustainable. That's why I offer a wide range of ways to work together. On my website, you'll find free nutrition downloads, low-cost guides and masterclasses, and my monthly membership, Fuel for Life Crew. For just $39 a month, my membership gives you direct access to me, live monthly calls, and a supportive community of busy, active people navigating similar challenges. And if you're ready for deeper, fully individualized support, I also offer one-to-one nutrition coaching with limited spots available. You can explore everything that I just mentioned at eatforendurance.com. All right, back to the episode. Okay, yeah, so we did name a million nutrients.
Eat, broaden your diet. Yeah, everything.
So
like common iron, D, zinc, like those ones that are commonly also tested on your lab work.
Yeah.
Like think about repeating those.
Yeah, and I mean, we know iron, vitamin D; those are commonly not that high in athletes too. Things we're always working on. So those are the things with the gut. We can kind of talk a little bit when we talk maybe more about like Hashimoto's. We can talk a little bit more specifically about diet if we touch on that later. bone health. What do we need to know about bone health and hypothyroidism?
Yeah. So it's interesting because it's kind of more about balance of everything when it comes to bone health and the thyroid function. But like your thyroid hormones can actually directly influence bone turnover. And we already know there's a lot of potential bone issues, especially if people are under eating, over exercising, all of that. But the balance of thyroid hormone matters. And I'm saying the balance because let's say you are hypothyroid and you get put on medication. It's also very possible to get over medicated. And we want to make sure that you're not going back and forth swinging too hard because that can essentially impact like how much bone you break down and how much you build, right? The osteoblast and osteoclast, you don't need to really know that right now. But hypothyroid is essentially associated with like a slower bone remodeling system, which sounds like it could be potentially helpful for some people, but like this actually leads to like poor bone quality for a lot of people. I would say some athletes and like runners might be at a better advantage to a degree because like as they're pounding their bones and feet and stuff like, right, they're actually telling their bones to like build. So that's good. But that if you are untreated hypothyroid, I would be thinking about that for you.
Yeah.
Especially if you're struggling with like fractures and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, again, like all this stuff is so connected. Like we're never just thinking about thyroid. Like often this is happening in the overall context of underfueling and or overexercise. And so there're just like a million different things going on. But again, what I'm trying to do is just highlight, like, this is just one more thing that is so like why it's so important to fuel adequately. Cause like, look at this domino effect in the body of like what happens when you don't give the body what it needs. Right. So we're just highlighting the thyroid today in that kind of overall context.
And it's underfueling, right? And that's leading to lower hormones, which we can talk about. I'm talking about sex hormones, like your estrogen levels. Yeah, that's going to also impact your bone health. And, you know, and all builds up on you.
Exactly. And I was reading somewhere else as well that kind of low thyroid hormones impacts your activity of your bone marrow, which of course makes red blood cells. And so that's kind of linking back, well, bone, but also iron, right? So your iron status and that can kind of trigger anemias, which again, we don't want. So yeah, so much. And I want to kind of wrap up this background, the kind of contextual information with cortisol. Maybe you can just speak a little bit about how is cortisol connected to the thyroid, just stress generally and all that.
Yeah. So cortisol is your stress hormone, right? We all produce it. It's really more about keeping it peaking and valleying when it should sort of throughout the day. But if we are overfueling, underfueling, overexercising, underexercising, really any of that, right? That has an impact on our cortisol levels. So when you move your body and you move your body hard and you're training hard, right? You're going to have increased cortisol. I see this a lot with athletes who train too at nighttime. That often impacts their sleep negatively, right? Not everyone impacts their sleep. And then they start to have this like imbalance throughout the entire 24-hour period. And it's not so much don't exercise, it's sometimes about time of day that you're doing things. But right, elevated cortisol is going to essentially it's going to go up and elevate when we are under fueling ourselves, so our recovery is poor, when we are over exercising, overtraining, over just mentally stress, whether that is your job, your kids, your lifestyle, relationship with food and your body and anything like that, right? Those are going to impact you. And it can signal the production of thyroid hormone to go down more. So, which we don't want, right? We want it to be just where it should be at. So, high cortisol can also impact just the conversion of the inactive to active thyroid hormone. So not only can it decrease the amount that your body is telling you to actually create, but then it can also impact how well you're actually able to utilize that free and available hormone to your body, which we really don't like. So, stress and cortisol are really, really interesting because they also play a role in a bigger picture of like thyroid, stress, and sex hormones, and they all start to impact one another. So it's not just, cortisol is bad and because you're exercising, right, you're going to have too much cortisol. It's really like, how are you managing your stress? How are you responding to the stressors, right? How are you responding to fueling your body to maintain healthy cortisol patterns as well? But also, I would honestly advocate from my patients and testing is like, are you talking to your dietitian, your trainer, whatever it is, about time of day and intensity, right, with cortisol levels on your body and your needs specifically as well? I think that can play a big role in people's training.
Yeah. And I think it's also when it comes, I mean, we've talked about stress a bunch before, and actually maybe it was 2 episodes ago, we were talking about immune health, and kind of just the whole stress bucket, like everything that goes into the stress bucket, right? And there are lots of different things. And also notice that it could just, like stress itself isn't always a bad thing, like inflammation, right? But like too much of it. And just like cortisol is not bad. It has the times where it is supposed to peak and valley. And it's when it gets dysregulated and things get off that things come out of whack in different seasons of life. I mean, you and I both have young children, right? And I think sometimes things can get out of whack and really crazy when people aren't willing to kind of be flexible with things, and they kind of want to do all the things when maybe in reality doing all the things is not the best course of action for them. And it sucks because, you want to be kicking ass at work, you want to be like a great parent and a partner and a friend, and you want to like do that race that you've been training for and this and that, but like maybe your body's like, yo, that's too much. Like something's got to give at some point. And I don't know about you, but a lot of people I get coming to me, it's like they really are trying to do all the things, and it's like sometimes I'm just trying to convince them, like, I don't think you can do all the things right now. You might have to reprioritize and just like hold back, and maybe we revisit doing all of the things like in 6 months or a year when this other thing is a little bit less. I don't know.
Right? It's not what you
know.
like to hear, you want a solution. But I say it all the time, even to my husband in the season of life like we're in. And I'm always like, I am that person always wanting to excel at everything and needing to find where I can pull back. And I'm like, this is why women have so much more autoimmunity that triggers between basically 40 and like 60, because everybody is just doing all the things and they're not taking breaks, and our society just isn't set up for this. So, we are all going through that. I think to some degree, everybody just has different buckets that they're feeling. But it is really hard to say, like, where do I pull back? But if you truly are finding it impacting your health, and maybe it's not just your thyroid, not just like your training and your performance or whatever it is. It could be like your immune system's just crapping out a lot. You know what I mean? You're getting sick a lot. You're getting all sorts of things, or you're developing autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's, right? Hypothyroidism, Graves' disease. That's a big like wake up call, warning sign that there's bigger things versus just a diagnosis. There's stuff that you have to get kind of managed.
Yeah, and it's really hard for people to change things because, again, I have people who are just not willing to reduce their exercise hours or change the diet that may not be working for them or whatever. And we do our best with what we've got. But at some point, if you're feeling like absolute garbage and you're not willing to make certain changes that just for whatever reason right now are not working for you, like, believe me, I want you to train for this and do all the stuff, but like your body is just maybe not letting you do all those things. So I know for myself personally, it's why I have personally taken a bit of a break in my endurance training, and I'm only starting to get back into it now, and I'm really listening to my body. But like when my kids were younger and with all the other stuff going on, building a small business, all the stuff, like my body was just like, nope, you are not doing this right now. Like this is not working. And I got an injury, and my body was just giving me those kind of red flags, like, nope, nope, nope. And eventually I was like, okay, I guess I got to do this. I got to chill now for a little bit. So I don't know, I know this is a little bit of a segue, but I thought it was just an important message, because in so many of the things that we talk about, whether it is thyroid or immune health or whatever, your body's sending you these signals for a reason, and we have to listen to them. And, so anyways, just a little throwing that out there. I want to revisit, I know you threw out some symptoms of hypothyroid. I just want to revisit real fast because, again, maybe not everybody out there needs to get a full thyroid panel, right? But when might you think, maybe I should get this tested? Because is it one of these things where like maybe we can talk about who might want to push for a full thyroid panel? Because just to be clear, most doctors are not going to order it unless you're in like some sort of concierge doctor's office where they're just like ordering all the things, or, and you ask where, it's no big deal. But most of the time people will push back a little bit and they'll want to see a abnormal thyroid or something TSH first. So maybe we can just talk about, okay, what are the red flags, things you're looking out for? And then who might want to push for kind of that full thyroid panel?
Yeah, I will say, I think that everybody, but especially, females really like 30 and up should be getting a thyroid panel every year.
Okay.
So I understand that is not going to be able to hit home for everybody. Everybody can't afford it. But if you really think about the the cost of testing, it can be like $150 to get a full panel like once a year. So even if you can save up to do that once, you know what I mean, and get it, not through your PCP and insurance, that can be helpful because as we said in the beginning, it controls everything in your body, right? So sometimes you like spending money or energy to fix your gut or do something, but it's actually like, you need to start over here and fix that or work on that alongside it. So I do think that everybody should.
It can be more expensive to get it through insurance sometimes, by the way. Like I think I once paid like $200 something for a vitamin D. And I'm like, I could have paid like $15 or whatever it is to do it myself.
Yeah. I had my doctor recently post about it, and she like ordered like 5 markers that were all very clinically relevant. And they sent me a bill for like how much it would have cost to get like 50 markers. And I was like, this is crazy. I should have just done, I knew I should have just done it on my own.
Yeah. Because it's quote diagnostic.
They're like
instead of preventative. Yeah.
Really, I mean, I guess that also merits getting like a good ethically moral practitioner that doesn't upcharge you on everything. But they exist, guys. Okay. So I think everybody should do it. I think especially females once a year if you can. And then, so common symptoms of thyroid dysfunction, and we'll lean towards hypothyroidism just because it's so much more prevalent. So we talked about fatigue issues, right? Just kind of like that fatigue, malaise feeling. It could even just be for athletes specifically, like recovery is just not where it should be. You're just struggling, whether it is to like hit your PRs, hit your times, like whatever it is. And you're like, I don't know why, nothing really has changed. That could be a warning sign for you. On top of that, not just really a symptom, but if a family member, a direct family member has any kind of thyroid issue, a lot of times you'll find with like our age individuals getting tested, they don't really know what their like grandparents and parents totally had because they weren't being fully checked. They just know they were hypothyroid. They likely had Hashimoto's though. So family history, 100% your doctor should be testing you more than a TSH, and that would be ridiculous to not. So we also have like the unexplained, honestly could be weight gain or weight loss, but we'll say weight gain or stubborn weight. You're exercising quite a lot. You're following your dietitian's like food plans and all these things and nothing is budging. Could be a sign to get your thyroid looked at. Imbalance in your menses, whether that is you are not getting them, you're going a long time without getting them, you're having them really frequently. I would want to think about both obviously your nutrition, right, and your movement, but then also sex hormones and thyroid hormones. We could think about physical things like brittle nails, hard nails, brittle hair, hair that won't grow or sheds a lot. That's a big sign for people. Infertility or struggling with miscarriages is a really, really big one as well. Constipation. A couple of other physical ones is like scalloping of the tongue, where you stick it out and it kind of like looks like the indentation of your teeth, will just show that swelling there. And then some other ones that people don't think about as much are going to be things like elevated cortisol, or sorry, not elevated cortisol, but elevated cholesterol is a really, really big one. So if you're like, I eat pretty well, I'm doing the lifestyle things, and your cholesterol panel isn't great and you don't have familial hypocholesterolemia, that would be a really big sign to me to be checking your thyroid, as well as like even just blood sugar dysregulation. If you're like, I got that eating down, right? Like we're working on it, I'm balancing my blood sugar, that would be a really, really big one to me. There's so many more, right? There's like acid reflux or voice is a really big one, constant clearing of the throat, especially after working out. If you're noticing that you're always clearing your throat or you're waking up and you have like this indigestion, burning, really any of that, I would be thinking about that too.
And it's so funny, as you're listening to all these things, of course I have to listen like, what are the other things that could be causing it? It's like fatigue, it's like iron, and then I know it's like there's so many, I'm like high cholesterol, I was like, oh well, that's also part of like, we see it in reds, and it's like, okay, well obviously if you're underfueling, that there's the downregulation of thyroid and there's that part, and and then also just like perimenopause and hormonal shifts, and so this is why it's so difficult, especially because like these things are showing up in midlife sometimes, and all these other things are going on. So yeah, it can be really tricky to kind of detangle some of this stuff, which is why
the thyroid, is like that. It's a real quick test. It's
Yeah,
not that
exactly.
kind of expensive. And
Yeah.
it's like, you can rule it out and then you know what to
Yes,
focus on.
exactly. Exactly. It's like you can do that and also kind of making sure someone is really well nourished and then seeing the changes that happen, right? So, but yes.
People are actually willing to like jump down these like restrictive diet plans for thyroid and be like, I think I have it. Let me go gluten-free, dairy-free, like do all these things, restricting more, right?
Yes.
Versus let me just find out, clear cut on lab what's happening and then move on from there. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we talk about the hair loss piece for a minute? Because I feel like that's such a big one for people. Yeah. And it's very traumatic for many people. So, because that is one of the signs, but like what else can, I mean, I know we're not going to do like a hair loss episode, although maybe I should.
I
but
do have a good blog on this if anybody's it's
send it to me.
free.
We will link to it.
But it similarly is like, here's 45 different things.
Yes.
And be contributing, and they all also connect, and you have to like, oh my God. But if hair loss, if we're thinking about athletes specifically too, like, again, I'll connect, but my very first thoughts obviously are going to be, under eating and over exercising. And then just generally for anybody, major life stressors that happen, because we can tend to just like lose our hair in the cycle when that is happening. And all of a sudden you think you're like losing all your hair, but maybe 4 months ago, you know what I mean? You had a death in the family, something really stressful went on. But we have to think about like actual like protein intake and nutrient absorption for everyone. So it might not be that you are not eating enough and you're not fueling properly. It could be that you have something going on in your gut as well that is impairing your ability to actually go out of its way to use what you're going out of your way to eat. Right. Mm-hmm. So that becomes a really big problem. So if you're like, I don't know, this girl's saying all these things like underfueling, but I'm not doing that. You have to think about what might be going on in your gut. Right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about testing for a minute. So just to clarify, a complete, like a full thyroid panel is not just like 2 or 3 things. Can you quickly just list what we like, if someone is going to their doctor and being like, I want a full thyroid panel, including these biomarkers, what should they say?
Okay. So there's the thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. They should know that. The total thyroxine is your T4. And then you also want your free thyroxine, which is your free T4. Then you want your total T3 and your free T3. Honestly, those are like the most important. And then you have your reverse T3. I don't personally feel like if like they're not going to order that, it's not the end of the world. It's going to be more potentially problematic in the athlete population, I think. But we can do a lot without it. That's the number one marker we're not going to order for you. And then we have our antithyroid peroxidase antibody, which is our TPO, and our antithyroid globulin antibody, which is our TGAB. And those are the antibodies. So they will check those. If you just say antibodies, they will usually check both of those. If you have to pick and choose and one's going to be off, it's usually the TPO. Okay. So that's the markers. You could also add in like T3 uptake. They might add that. I honestly, if you're like really trying to advocate for yourself, if you can at least get a TSH, a total and free T4, a free T3, and your antibodies, you're in pretty good shape.
Good. Awesome. And what about time of day, or, what else should they know about testing? Because, I mean, we do know that thyroid hormone is variable. Is there like, should they just be consistent? Should they get a time of day? Like, what should you know? Is it fast, not fast?
Yep. So you usually, when you're doing it, so I do defer to whoever's ordering it, because sometimes if you're on medication and your doctor's trying to see different things, but you usually want to do it like first thing in the morning, the same time of day every day. So every time. So if you're doing your thyroid panel every 4 to 6 months, like 7 a.m., you know what I mean? Every time you do it, pre-breakfast, pre-eating. A lot of times I tell people we're like, want to do it without having taken your medication, but I would defer to your prescriber and what they're ordering provider. But usually you want to test before thyroid medication. You usually want to take like a 3 to 5 day break of all supplements prior, because common things like hair loss, if you're taking biotin, right, that is going to actually cause false elevations on your thyroid panel, which we don't want to see, because then all of a sudden we're freaking out saying there's something wrong with your thyroid and it's a supplement that you took. So you want to make sure that you take a break for a few days prior to doing your testing. You can resume it right afterwards. And then usually we'll say you want to do it days like 10 through 20 of your cycle. Everybody's a little different, right? Especially athletes, we tend to have them have different kind of cycle spans. But if you can like gravitate towards the second half of your cycle, that can usually be a little bit better. Otherwise, it can slightly impact the thyroid levels,
Cool.
the hormones specifically. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Anything else they should know about kind of labs, testing? I mean, I feel like we covered that pretty well. Is there anything else you would add to that?
The only thing I would maybe off the top of my head add is if you are on medication, you're doing medication change, you really want to wait at least like 3 to 4 months before rechecking to make sure you can see what the thyroid's really doing.
Hey guys, one quick thing before we continue. If fueling feels confusing, overwhelming, or just harder than you expected, I created Eat for Endurance to give athletes realistic, evidence-based support without the noise. I have free downloads, low-cost guides, and masterclasses, a monthly membership where you can ask me your nutrition questions for $39 a month, and limited one-to-one coaching spots for athletes who want deeper, individualized support. There truly is something for everyone and every budget. You can explore all that stuff at eatforendurance.com. All right, let's get back to the episode. Okay, so the next thing I really wanted to go through is like primary hypothyroidism, or Hashimoto's, whatever, where it's more like genetic, you have this autoimmune situation, versus hypothyroidism from underfueling, right? And, you know, how can we tell the difference in those things? How can people kind of differentiate? And maybe we even kind of, because I don't think we actually talked about this yet, like how underfueling causes hypothyroidism to happen.
So we did, but sort of like...
Oh, we did. Sorry.
Well, it was mostly like a side note early on.
Yeah.
So she caught everything, the 9 million things we've said.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. So, right. So you have your primary hypothyroidism, which for most people is going to be Hashimoto's, which just kind of reviews like your immune system attacks your thyroid tissue then stops being able to produce hormone. So on one of the biggest ways you can tell the difference for these people is lab work, like we just said, right? So for those people, you're going to usually be seeing at minimum, it depends on what point and like the destruction you're testing, but their antibodies are going to be elevated. And then you'll usually start to see their TSH be elevated and their hormones are going to be like low or low normal in comparison. So if you got your full thyroid panel that we just listed out for you and you're wondering if you have Hashimoto's, that's like what you'll see or some version of that.
Would you see that ever in someone who is underfueling? And hypo.
You can, yes. So they're not mutually exclusive. I guess is very important to say up front. Is that like your underfueling, right, could be, or something in your life, either way, as a stressor, right, could be the trigger to the development of Hashimoto. So it could be like you have the genetics, right, where usually to say an autoimmune condition, very general, but we say you need the genetics. You have like a gut disruption and then you have a trigger or triggers. So it could be, I'm chronically underfueling, I'm chronically over exercising, right? I'm disrupting the gut because those disrupt the gut. And then that is enough to trigger my autoimmune reaction. And
I saw this in a 17-year-old girl, unfortunately.
Yes.
It was rough. Yeah.
We definitely see that often. But then you can compare it to having, underfueling related hypothyroidism or REDS for a lot of people, which is going to be, if you remember in the beginning when we were talking about how, okay, we produce T4 and T3, but in the state of underfueling, over exercising, high stress, restrictive eating, all of these different things, caloric reduction, we can see the T4 actually becomes something called reverse T3. And that is almost never tested unless you're going to a functional practitioner. It's almost never tested. It's like slamming on the brake of the car. So what we see is not necessarily elevated antibodies, right? We don't necessarily potentially, honestly, even see the TSH jump too much because the T4 might still be produced. We didn't go into this, but like that's what controls your TSH level. But that T4 is then not becoming what we need it to be the active hormone because we're trying to conserve, right, our energy and our hormones. And it goes to this reverse T3, which then I would say is this like alternate state of hypothyroidism where we're like slamming on the brakes of the car. Your body's saying, slow down. We need to conserve because we are not taking in or burning too much of the caloric content that we need. So the number one population I see this with is athletes, right? Or especially like marathoners, huge. So marathoners, really anyone who is underfueling and overexercising, history of eating disorders, right? Restrictive eating. So any of that, we see this a lot. And you can never know really, you know what I mean, without doing the lab panel. Especially if we're looking at somebody who might be struggling with REDS, like you need to see it on the lab panel. But they're at least going to better respond to just correcting those lifestyle things, right? The intake of calories, the balance of blood sugar, reducing stress load, reducing overexercising. Like those are the people that better respond. It's the people who are having that autoimmune reaction that's like, now we have this immune system issue. We also potentially have this undereating issue, like all these other things going on. And they may not just respond to eating more, you know what I mean? Or like reducing exercise. So that's I guess a common way, if you can't afford testing or you can't order testing, that you could work with your client.
So once we get to the point where the immune system is involved and we see the antibodies, at play, I guess what I want my audience to understand is, when do meds happen? Like, when do we need meds? Is this a situation where you can ever, like, those things are acting up and you can like reverse and go back to and just correct with nutrition? And when do meds have to be involved? Because I do think this is something where sometimes people are just like, they're just thrown some meds and then they're just on meds now for the rest of their life, or I don't know, but like kind of just maybe we can kind of wade through this.
Meds and that's going to fix it, right?
Yeah. So it's kind of because, and also just throwing out there, obviously medication is so important and crucial for certain people. So it's kind of trying to differentiate, like, when are meds essential and when can we just use more of a nutrition approach? How can we tell? Obviously, you work with a provider too, but just, again, sometimes not everyone is as informed with some of this stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah. So part of the problem is it can, like I said earlier, it can take like 7 to 10 years to really have like this full blown like Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, which is where both you have the immune activation and the hypothyroidism, which means your hormones are low now, right? Yeah. So if there's like the stage 1 situation where it's just like your antibodies are elevated, right? We have that immune activation. You don't need medication then. Right? Most people, unless they just feel horrible, aren't going to need it. It's really that earlier stage where it's like the immune system's on fire and our traditional world is not testing it and finding it until it's too late for people. And honestly, for a lot of people, working on their nutrition, their stress, their gut actually can be enough to kind of like stop it in its tracks and reverse it. Right.
Yeah.
Then we kind of like move into this like more reactive stage. Maybe we're not full blown hyperthyroidism, but we have like the elevated antibodies. And then we start to develop more symptoms, right? So those are the people who's like actually probably been dealing with it a while and don't know. They are the more complicated of like, you could use meds, you could not use meds. You know what I mean? Where it's like, your symptoms are you just a little bit fatigued, having trouble with your recovery? Is your sleep a little off? You have maybe like you gained 5-10 pounds and you're like struggling. It depends on what your beliefs are, how bad your symptoms are. Do you want meds? Like for half those people, I'd say they could probably do lifestyle changes and fix it. The other half, a lot more digging probably has to happen because it goes beyond just your gut and your thyroid, right? Like as you learn, like there's infections, there's all these different things that we need to think about for people with autoimmunity. But if you're so far blown where it's like you are now what we call Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, which is you have the immune activation and your hormones are low, I really like medication for people. It doesn't mean you're going to be on it forever. Some may, because a lot of times you can't do what you need to do to fix the problem, right? Which means if you have that going on, your hormones are low, you're so tired, you can't give a crap about cooking your meals, right? From scratch. So you're not eating or you're eating like crap, or you can't yourself to go like deal with even any like toxic relationships in your life. You're so worn out, or you can't get your gut to do what it needs to do. It's so slow that your SIBO is just like on fire and you just keep having this IBS issue, which then is like a huge issue for clearing and fixing hypothyroidism as well as fixing your gut. Like we see medication support help those people get well, right? So I think it really depends how far gone people are in terms of like, has it been 20 years that you've been undiagnosed because no one's checked you? You may be somebody who uses medication for the rest of your life. And that's okay. That's potentially okay, right? The goal would be work on everything so much that you don't keep having to increase your dosage of medication. And then some people are on medication and not on the right medications, right? There's so much we could talk about just medication probably for forever too. I personally like, we're going off lab markers. If you're super symptomatic and your TSH is above 3 and your free T3 level is like 2.7, 2.6 and lower, I personally would recommend you talk to your doctor about medication. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So now we've like thrown so much at everybody and maybe their head's spinning with all this information, but like now let's like, I want to leave people with some practical kind of ways to move forward. Right. So, they know that they can get this testing done, and whether or not they take that to their doctor or do it on their own, so they can get some testing done, and get some help there, just or at least see where they're at. Obviously, if someone suspects they're underfueling and they're suffering kind of different symptomology there, and especially if we see some thyroid hormone suppress, like working on your fueling. But I don't know, what are some other, whether it's kind of nutrient specific strategies or other things that people can do? It's like, okay, I have a sluggish thyroid or things are kind of slowed down. How can I move forward there? Like, let's say they don't need medication. So if it's not that severe.
Not as severe, we don't need medication. So generally speaking, right, eating enough is just period.
Yeah.
Where are we eating enough? And then in eating enough, are we balancing the meals well, right? Like protein, carbs, and fat every single meal. Because blood sugar regulation really matters when we are hyperglycemic or like low all over the place with blood sugar and hypo. It can actually impact our thyroid quite a lot. People don't really realize that, but it's very basic.
It's stressful. It's stressful on your body, right? Like it's a form of stress.
Yes. So blood sugar regulation, eating enough, and kind of like starting with those foundational pieces. Also just diversity is really, really important for nutrients and for your gut, which then 20% of the thyroid hormone conversion happens. So that's just like pick two new vegetables or fruits per week to try, right? You can have your staples and eat them all the time. It's really hard for the athletic world because they are very regimented in what they do and they don't really venture outside of what they know when they're counting macros and doing things. But like figure it out and try something new, especially low calorie things, right? That can influence your gut in a really great way. If you find out you have Hashimoto's versus, an underfueling problem that's leading to that hypothyroidism, I would consider working with a dietitian on a gluten and or maybe a dairy elimination short term. So don't do that on your own. Do it with somebody who can help you replace those foods you're potentially removing. The goal of any elimination diet is not to eliminate the food. It's just to put it back to see how you actually react. But there's a lot of research just specifically even on gluten and autoimmunity and Hashimoto's and how removing that can put that fire out, right, in the immune system. So a lot of people have stopped their need for a medication by doing that. Doesn't mean it's going to fix it for everyone, but it's worth, especially if you're symptomatic. There's also thinking about your electrolytes is really important. There's actually, we taught that in GHT Academy about like sodium and potassium balance. So actually excessive like sodium and salt intake, especially from like poorer food choices than like thinking adding salt to your food, you know what I mean? Can actually like promote the autoimmune response. And then not only if you're eating excessive salt, are you having enough potassium to dampen that? So getting just in your general blood work, which your PCP will be doing, you know what I mean, on your electrolytes, or if you're somebody who's like constantly replenishing with electrolyte packets, right? It's important to know, especially if you have a really high sodium packet, like, do you actually need all of that? Are you using it like, how do we know how we feel away from it? So that's just something your practitioner maybe hasn't even considered.
Yeah. I want to go deeper on that one for a minute because like when you like a lot of endurance athletes are listening, right? And so they have sodium, whether it's sports drinks, electrolyte drinks, sodium in their gels, chews, whatever, as part of their fueling plan. And yeah, I think this is something that people can go a little crazy on. They can push too hard on and maybe they don't need it. That said, it plays a really important role. And so we are wanting people to not overly stress about, like, we don't want them to limit sodium in the diet. It is really important, especially if they are heavy or salty sweaters. But at the same time, like, yeah, there are a lot of cases, and I see it too, where people, not even just athletes, it's like every time I'm in like an airport or in a store, it's like, they're just like, these packets are everywhere now. And so people are just dumping it all the time and everything when maybe you don't need to be drinking electrolytes 24/7, So I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about.
You hardly do, and people are like, God, do my electrolytes. It's like, it's just like an extra cup of water. You know what I mean? Or like, So
but I'm curious, what you have to say about that specifically, like in the context of athletes' needs.
Yeah, everything is always about balance. I think it's partially, like you said, it depends on what type of exercise, what type of climate you're in, right?
Yep.
How, like, the duration of everything. I think utilizing electrolyte packets to replenish, like, post race, right? Or
Yeah.
during the race. Like, that's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
different story than I'm sipping on 3 electrolyte packets throughout the day because
Sure.
right? So, but
Yeah.
it happens all the time, right? Or you just see like your general Joe Schmoes, like I started going to the gym and they start doing it. It's
Yeah.
like, you probably don't need this. So if you're living in Florida, right, and you're running, 10 to 20 miles a day, like you probably need at least a packet a day. Like,
I hope you're not running 10 or 20 miles a day. Also, that's a lot. But who
but
knows? Yeah. No, I know.
you know what I mean? But if you're like waiting for a marathon coming up and you're doing that, like you need to have a different plan than
Yes,
somebody
of
who
course.
is going out running 3 to 5 miles a day and
Mm.
lives in New York, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I do think it's like be aware of that, and also just because sadly a lot of what we take and we're on there too is like what social media says, and social
Mm.
media gives you this sort of space and doesn't have context, which is why it's so important to work with somebody who niches in what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not just
Yeah.
oh, this
Yeah.
packet's the best that so-and-so said to take it. It might not be the best for your sport. It might not be the best
Yeah.
for your training and where you're at.
Or maybe you need sodium, but you don't need the 1,000 milligram sodium packet, And then also, potassium is important. You can get it in food, and maybe you're also looking into that. So just wanted to mention that. It's interesting too, though, because sometimes like I'll have a client who maybe does have constipation and they are putting a little bit more minerals or like focusing on that stuff. And they're like, oh, when I added electrolyte drinks, like that has helped. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great.
Yeah,
and then
the sodium is changing how the water is going into your bowel and making you poop. It's not that you're deficient in the sodium. You're just making yourself positive. So for like 9 out of 10 people. So those would be somewhere where I would say, are you eating enough, right? And are you drinking enough? And do you have a thyroid problem or a gut problem more than 1,000 milligrams of sodium?
Well, the person I'm thinking of in particular who I know is going to listen to this, we have been working on all of those things. She is eating enough and all that. So, awesome. Yeah. I mean, is there anything else you want to add to this discussion? I mean, I think we kind of went through a lot of things, and I know we only scratched the surface of this very complicated topic that runs deep, but what do you think, what else is important to know, whether it's kind of a practical takeaway or any other information that people might want to have kind of about thyroid health?
We could truly, like, even just the nutrition for like thyroid conditions, we could talk about this for so long. I think that I sort of kind of broken record here, but like if you can afford to do any kind of testing with people, that's always good. It doesn't mean you have to test everything under the sun. You should work with somebody who's asking the right questions to like prioritize your time, money, and energy. But remember, like a thyroid panel for most people needs to be done 1 to 2 times a year, unless you're actively changing medications or symptomatic or going through something. So if you're like, I have always wondered, right? Like it doesn't seem like I'm hitting my goals. It doesn't, whatever it is, just start with a thyroid panel. There's lots of practitioners out there like, myself that order them that then,
I do too.
Right. We're be like, there's a problem. Let's work on it. Like maybe so you can do that and then kind of assess from there. But the other issue becomes, which is why we could talk about forever, is once you have the thyroid panel, depending on what's off, determines a lot of the next steps, whether that's more testing or different dietary approaches, right? So it's why it's really important to work with somebody who is well-read into the thyroid and thyroid lab testing, because what you do doesn't just equal, okay, now you need a medication or now you need to eat more, right? Like exercise less. We need to know, maybe you are somebody that fits the need to try to do a gluten elimination. Maybe you're somebody who needs a CGM for blood sugar regulation. Maybe you're someone who needs to stop filling all the buckets, right? Like there's so many different starting points for people. And some people you might test them and say, oh my God, you needed a medication a year ago. You know what I mean? And somebody else, it might just be nutrition related. So, and if you're a practitioner listening at all, like don't assume just because somebody is getting their thyroid tested by an endocrinologist that they're getting it all checked and they're on the right plan. Like there's so much dietitians, nutritionists, coaches can do with those clients to support them, even their medication absorption, right? So I think it's really, really important to just know there's no one size fits all when it comes to the thyroid.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Katie. I'll stop us there, even though I know, again, we could keep going forever on this.
Scratch the surface.
I know. If people want to learn more. Yeah, yeah. Well, where can everyone find you online? And I know you work both with clients and also practitioners, so maybe you can kind of spell out those two sides of your business if people want to learn more from you.
More things to confuse everyone. So we are like a dual business. We help, if you go to guthonesttruth.com, you can see our patient side where we work with much more of the clinical, like lab testing protocol type of side. And then GHT, Gut Honest Truth, GHT-academy.com is where practitioners and coaches can come learn all about our continuing ed. We have a whole thyroid course, which is really informative. I will say I learned a lot, even just putting that together. But you can follow me. I'm mostly active on Instagram at guthonesttruth.com. I also have a podcast. It's just not been active since kids.
Yes.
That actually have a lot of thyroid conversation on there.
Cool.
So if you are looking for more resources, we have like a thyroid ebook, lots of blogs, lots of podcast episodes. So you can go learn more than you ever wanted to know, probably.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Katie, for sharing your knowledge with us. And thanks for coming on.
Anyway, come read my blogs if you need to remind yourself of all the things we threw out.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks. All right, that is our show for today. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you are enjoying this podcast, I'd love it if you would share it with a friend or on social media, and if you could leave a 5-star rating and review. And of course, hit follow or subscribe so you do not miss another episode. If you'd like to support my free content, you can check out my affiliate codes to Scratch, Momentous, Fuel Goods, Tailwind, so many more places on the shop page of eatforendurance.com. And you can also visit my Patreon page if you'd like to throw a few bucks my way. Both are linked to in the show notes. And finally, I always love hearing from you guys, whether it's feedback, topic requests. This actual topic, the thyroid health, was a topic request, so send them my way. I do make them happen. And of course, you can always just say hi and share what's going on with you. So thank you so much for listening. I will see you all next time.